I want to talk to you today about a new proposed rule offered up by FinCEN that has to do with your risk assessment and your compliance with the BSA AML structure. I want to talk to you today specifically to mortgage lenders and how you are going to be dealing with this regulation. Let me give a first disclaimer that this is not legal advice. You haven't paid for legal advice and you're not getting that. What you are getting is my experience of a couple of decades investigating mortgage fraud combined with my abilities and my certification as a certified anti-money laundering specialist. I'm limiting, of course, my comments today to mortgage lenders. So what we're going to do is I'm going to talk to you about this rule. I'm going to show you how it might apply to your business because it is certainly a change. And I'm going to suggest some ways that you can best comply with this. What we're not going to do is cover the myriad of risks that you are facing. We're simply going to talk about the risk assessment as it pertains to BSA AML. So what FinCEN is requiring you to do is to identify the risks that pertain to your operation, specifically your operation, to evaluate those risks as the foundation of your P&Ps, and then to document everything. And as we know in this world of BSA compliance, if it's not written down, it doesn't exist. So everything that we're going to talk about, you've got to document. So let's take a quick look at this, the FinCEN fact sheet about this new rule. The proposed rule to strengthen and modernize financial institution AML CFT programs. They are saying that these regulations would now expressly require that such programs be effective, risk-based, and reasonably designed. I think it is that word effective that is causing me the most turmoil. I'm looking at that, and I think a lot of people are concerned about the use of that word. Risk-based, they want robust analyses of what you think your risks are, and we're going to cover mortgage lending risks here today. This is where I'm hoping to be an asset to you. And it's always needed to be reasonably designed. That continues, but effective and risk-based. I think what happened, my reading of this just as a preamble, is that FinCEN got tired of the very shallow AI-generated kind of chat GPT check the box training that's out there. When you think about it, if you're running a gold trading operation or a casino, your risks are entirely different than the risks of a mortgage lender. So why are you taking the same AML course and checking the box that you comply? I think that's the underlying angst of FinCEN on this regulation. All right, so here are some of the comments that have been submitted. I'm recording this on August 25th, and there have been a number of comments submitted. You can go online and look at them. The first comment, yes to fraud and human trafficking, but are we just adopting FinCEN other priorities as busy work? There's a bit of resentment and pleas not to discriminate. Examiners in the U.S. are inconsistent, especially in the grading of what's important. There's a comment about the burdens on smaller institutions here. And given all this change, are we going to start to be overly cautious? In terms of the risk assessment, it says here the proposed rule, I'm going to read this, would require a financial institution's AML CFT program to include a risk assessment to better enable it to identify and understand its exposure to money laundering, terrorist financing, and other illicit finance activities. I'm going to comment here on their use of AML CFT. They seem to be moving to that, away from BSA AML. And I think what's going to happen is if you continue to call it BSA AML training, you're going to sound just as dated as somebody who calls a closing disclosure a HUD 1. Here, specifically, the proposed rule requires the risk assessment to process, the risk assessment process to identify, evaluate, and document the financial institution's risks, including consideration of the AML CFT priorities as appropriate. FinCEN's priorities. So what FinCEN is saying is our priorities are your priorities. What we're going to do is we're going to spend a bit of time on mortgage-related detailed risk assessment, the P&Ps that you might tie to that. And yeah, it's all got to be based on FinCEN's priorities. All right, so here's what we're going to do. Let's talk about identifying what your risks are. First, to create your risk assessment, you've got to understand what FinCEN's priorities are. You've got to understand their regulations. So read it, spend some time in the regulation. Second, ID your own business risks related to money laundering and fraud. Third, prioritize those risks. Then create strategies to handle them, write it all out, use technology, there's plenty of it, and stay current. I think those 6 things are like the foundation of your risk assessment. I got $1 million that I want to launder. I take 100,000 and I buy a junky piece of property. And then I spend 150 just improving it, blowing out walls and adding rooms and all new appliances and landscaping and just dial this thing in. Add a pool. It's not hard to find contractors that will work for cash. So I can take this junky house and turn it into a little gem that maybe is worth $250,000 and sell it. When I sell that, it's laundered money. I increase the value with cash. Not hard to find contractors to work for cash. And I then create a little gem and sell the house. Here's where it creates risk for you, the mortgage lender. What if instead of selling this house, I decide that I'm going to come to you and get a cash out refinance? You don't want to give cash to a money launderer, but are you giving cash if I come to you and take cash out of this house and then continue to hold it as maybe an Airbnb? I worry about that because I don't think we've really done a lot of worrying in our industry about what a borrower is going to do with their cash out. I think FinCEN doesn't want you to give cash to money launderers. I think that's a potential here, a potential worry with cash out refinances. Let me talk about cheating with trucks and CPAs. I was asked to investigate a file where I had a truck driver who filed a Schedule C, and on the Schedule C, he showed about $30,000 of income and about $50,000 in depreciation. Well, what do we do in the mortgage industry? We let you add that cash back to your income. So $30,000 plus, we let him add back 50 grand. All of a sudden, this guy's making 80 and he's a homeowner. Well, when this loan went bad, we looked at this file and then we pulled about a dozen loans from this broker. And lo and behold, we all had truck drivers and they all had the same CPA, and he was doing the same accounting trick for every one of them. And he was taking an even $50,000 every single time. Notice the lessons that you get from this. Sure, you want your people talking. Sure, you want your underwriters and processors to talk about the things that they're finding and to pull loose threads on this. Also, I think it should encourage open communication between your underwriters and processors, everybody who's in your office. I had a client who had freaky file Fridays, and on Fridays, everybody talked about the weird things that they'd seen come across their desk during the week. If you had a freaky file Friday and your people started talking about, yeah, I've got truck drivers, got a bunch of them, they're all taking depreciation, you might uncover things like this before these loans get funded. Next, proper risk assessment is going to mean that you recognize abnormal patterns in loan applications and you pay attention to them and train for the ways that insiders or other knowledgeable people could take advantage of you. Given your book of business, this is the thing I want to impress on you. Let's take a look at this example. This is happened in Northern California where a loan the only income that this woman showed in her file was a substantial amount of child support on a court order. The loan broker got a little lazy and started using court numbers that didn't apply to that particular jurisdiction, that particular court. And he got caught. Fannie came out with a pronouncement about this and said, hey, Northern California child support court orders are showing up as bogus. Well, this file highlights the length that people can go to sometimes to find their way between the cracks and get things funded that shouldn't fund. Sure, we accept um, documents showing child support to support income, but when it's the only income, maybe some flags should be raised, and there should be an interview with the borrower about this source of income. What's the lesson? Train your people to know normal and abnormal. Make sure that they have a flag go up when they see something that is strange, and this certainly is strange. It can happen that you have your income, a substantial portion of it comes from child support, but it's not usual. Doesn't it's an abnormal thing, and it should have gotten more attention. I say FinCEN's priorities are your priorities. Trust but verify. Train your people. Communicate between those who are in the origination chain. Know what's abnormal. Identify insider involvement. This is going to be where you've got a bit of a problem, because sometimes you're going to find things that affect, well, you got to call HR. Let's put it that way. Or it might affect counterparty relationships, your relationships with brokers. We live in a commissioned world where you have people coming after you to fund fraud that might be realtors, loan brokers, loan officers, and others. And they've got a real stake in making sure that something gets funded. Well, in this world we live in, when things are commission driven, sometimes people cut corners that they shouldn't cut. In favor of interviews, let me tell you a story about the value of an interview. I was given a file in Atlanta to investigate. It was a first payment default, and the value was way off. We had the value at $1.5 million, and the appraisal showed $2 million. So first payment default and a value off like that, I'm thinking property flippers. I'm thinking real bad problems. But we called the borrower, got the borrower on the line, and oddly, the borrower was quite happy to talk to me. He said, I'm as shocked as anybody. He goes, I knew I overpaid for this property, but the house was full of recording equipment, keyboards. I'm an entertainer, he said, and I expected the house to have a bunch of gear inside. It was stripped out. He closed on the house. The house just was empty. And while he was trying to figure out what to do, he didn't make a payment. So we had this conversation, and I went from believing we might have a property flip to we have a borrower who's been scammed here. I'm in favor of interviews because they will help you get to what your actual risks were. Keep an open mind about what you're going to hear when you try and figure out a loan problem. I talked to a borrower one time, and I asked her about these 4 other properties she owned, and she said, what properties? Turns out that her ex-boyfriend, a loan officer, took her identity and bought a bunch of Airbnbs in her name. So keep an open mind. You never know what you're going to find out. Your risks are what matter. The reason I say that here is that your risks, given the type of lending that you do, are different than anybody else's type of risk. Where do you make loans? What kind of loans? I mean, you're not a art dealer. You're not a gold trader. You are a mortgage lender in the United States. And depending on the type of loans that you make, you have a certain amount of risks that are unique to you. All right. So we've introduced you to it. We've applied it. I've suggested a few things that might help you comply with it. And I just would like you to go to the FinCEN website, read it, comment on it, and you've got until September 3rd to do that. So there's not much time, but it's coming your way, and it's going to change what you have to do internally to run an effective BSA department. All right. Thanks very much.